Hi guys, welcome back to Counterpoints. My name is Connor, and tonight we are going to be talking to Osiris. I don't know, is there a different name that you'd like to be called?
Well, my name's Connor as well, but I think that might be confusing. So I
Oh
think we should
no!
probably just yeah.
How do you spell it?
Conner. So
Ha! My
yeah,
my parents are very creative. Conor, and that always trips people up. They always spell it wrong. So
yeah,
nice.
yeah. Mine was literally my when I was born, they told the nurse, oh, we want him to be named Connor, and the nurse didn't ask for spelling, and she just spelled it Conner, and that's just how it was spelled.
Oh
So.
no. Fair enough.
It's all right. It's all right. Everybody misspells it. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the topic of conversation, I believe, for tonight is Jordan Peterson. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me.
Well, take it away. I will take the. I don't know. I'm not classically schooled in debate, so I'll take the.
Neither am I actually. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. I've had plenty of like text conversations and or not necessarily text, but just Facebook stuff like that, YouTube comment sections. That's like the extent of my engagement in this area. So the only thing that I really thought to start out was because it sounds like, I mean, are you like a fan of Jordan Peterson, or are you just don't find him as objectionable as I do, or like what's your sort of relationship with his presence online and in media?
Yeah. So I guess Jordan Peterson was really one of the first figures that I found. Let's call it the reactionary right.
Hmm.
And I did just see the video that went viral where like people are screaming at him and he's like, I don't like Nazis. Like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I've been following his trajectory probably since that video went viral.
Okay.
And I would say that I was already on the path to kind of after the military, just struggling to find purpose and meaning and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of did a lot of the heavy lifting even before following Jordan Peterson. But then
Hmm.
he basically articulated a lot of the things that I had already gone through.
Okay.
And I felt like the articulation of his perspective could be helpful to somebody who is depressed or suicidal or listless
Hmm.
or anything like that. And a lot of his psychological stuff, a lot of his self help stuff, maybe not his culture war stuff, which we can get into
Touch on
that.
that. Yeah.
But I think a lot of that stuff, and even some of the religious stuff, I think is really valuable and kind of worth conserving.
Hmm.
But that I would say that I do find it ironic that his personal life is sometimes a mess. But I mean, I don't think you can hold all the people you like to such a high standard that they're incapable of fault. I think that's kind of like a silly
No,
level of
that's
celebrity worship.
perfectly that's totally valid. I would say, and I don't want to comment on that too much because it's
Oh, come
obviously
on, that's where the fun is.
no, no, no. It's just with what's recently come to light. I don't want to like ruffle too many feathers, and I don't want to go too hard on him with his like personal life stuff. But I will say the only reason any other time where I would have a problem with it, with his what's going on in his personal life, is because he does authoritatively tell people very often to, his one of his classic things is, make sure your room is in perfect order before you try to fix the world or whatever, like that. And so for him, his
His room's
life to
not
be,
clean.
his room isn't clean at all right now. So I do find that very hypocritical, and like,
Yeah.
and I mean that in just, again, I don't want to go too hard on his
Well,
personal life stuff,
for
but it is.
the sake of posterity, just in case
Yeah,
somebody discovers this video, years
yeah,
from now,
yeah, yeah,
kind of Jordan Peterson is in I don't want to say anything negative, but obviously very serious shit. I think his
yeah,
I think
yeah,
I think his wife was diagnosed with cancer a year or two ago.
yeah.
He used benzodiazepines, which I'm not familiar with, like the pharmacology of it. But basically like antidepressants. He
It's an
had
antidepressant, yeah.
Yeah, so he had a physical and psychological withdrawal from them. Had to check into rehab. The withdrawal was so bad, and then also his daughter Michaela, who both of them suffer immune disorders and maybe depressive episodes. Um, Michaela's life is not a fairy tale of traditional conservative values,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and both of them have gone on a fad diet that you can say their promotion of. I wouldn't say he promotes it. I would say she does.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't think he does as much, but she definitely, that's her big thing is
yeah,
promoting that.
promoting a fad diet for autoimmune disorders is relatively complex and problematic stuff. But
Yeah, my biggest problem, and this is all I'll say about his daughter, I guess, in regards to that, is
come
that
on,
she's
you're the one
not
who's supposed to be
she.
talking
No, no,
shit.
no.
You're supposed to be
Well,
talking shit. Why am I the one talking shit?
I'll talk shit about Jordan Peterson, but his daughter's kind of irrelevant to the conversation. But all I'll say about that is that his daughter is not a nutritionist, and so it is a little weird for a non somebody who doesn't specialize in nutrition or even healthcare for that matter to be promoting a diet that may or may not have worked for her. I'm not gonna go. I mean, I think her father is just a straight up snake oil salesman, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't know if that actually worked for her though. If it did, cool, but that's not necessarily something you should probably be promoting for the wider population without there's a reason why the medical community exists, and you should generally go with what doctors tell you, not with what just some random person who says that this worked for them tells you, especially if they're asking for money. That's the
Well,
big thing.
and Joe Rogan interviewed, I think, Dr. Rhonda Thompson. He's
Mm-hmm.
had her on the show repeatedly, and she's one of his favorites, but the material's kind of
Mm-hmm.
dry. I think they
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit, and what she said is that it could be basically an elimination diet,
Yeah.
which is like a concept of like removing food groups or certain foods from your diet until you feel the best that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And that was kind of her suggestion, was like, they probably shouldn't just be eating meat. They should probably be reconstituting other things into their diet, but then just adding things slowly back, so they know
Yeah.
what they react negatively to or positively to. And
Mm-hmm.
there was one thing that was kind of funny where Jordan Peterson was talking about how like a shot of like apple cider vinegar took him out for like a
Took him
fucking
out
month,
for a month.
a month,
Yeah.
and I was like, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, bud. Like, I mean,
I
it could
that
be
to
the
me,
apple cider vinegar, but I think it might be something else.
to me that sounds like, I mean, you might have done something else that day or even that week that was like, that you had a really strong reaction to, but that much apple cider, I don't see that. And then his whole thing about how he didn't sleep for like a month, and I'm like, you should be dead.
Yeah,
uh
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so there, yeah, I don't know. This is kind of more, that kind of speaks more to a broader issue that I have with Jordan Peterson. Is he says it really well sometimes, but he tends to very hyperbolically represent things.
Mhm.
And I think that can be problematic in a lot of ways, especially when you're pushing sort of yourself. As I don't have like a huge problem with his self-help stuff. I think for the most part a lot of it isn't particularly profound or new. He's just saying it in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of it is, the like, life is suffering. Yeah, no shit. People have been saying that for years. We need a higher purpose, however you find that purpose, whatever. Again, it's something that's been in the literature for a long time. People are aware of that, I think. And I watched Contra's video to kind of just help prep for this, to just kind of, because I haven't actually watched anything on Jordan Peterson in a while, because he's kind of removed himself from the public presence so much because of his aforementioned personal problems. But uh, she pointed out that, I completely lost my train of thought, to be honest. She was saying,
Yeah. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, I wasn't going to interrupt, but Contra, that you were kind of talking about how he's restating older
Yeah,
truths or whatever.
yeah. He tends to. Oh, that's what it was. Is that Contra pointed out that he's kind of cashing in on sort of a market of disenfranchised young white guys, pretty much, who maybe haven't heard that stuff before.
Mhm.
And I get that, and that's why, I mean, I've got a younger brother who absolutely, just smacking the mic. I've got a younger brother who absolutely loves Jordan Peterson, and it's and it,
Uh-oh. Might have lost you. Can you still hear me? All right. Sorry for the technical issues, folks. You might have to end the call and call back. Hey, bud, can you hear me?
That basically my problems with him don't and I probably talked to myself after that for a couple of seconds before I realized what happened. But what I said after that was that I kind of, my problem doesn't as much come in with his self-help stuff as it does with his broader social ascriptions, and how that can and where that can kind of direct people.
Well, can I feel like it needs to be said though, because this is something that I really don't think gets talked about a lot, especially when it comes to my generation. I'm 30. I'm in my early 30s. I think I'm 33 this year. I don't track my age anymore because I'm an old bastard. But kind of what's your age range?
I'm 26, so not much younger than you.
Yeah, but I think I came out in a slightly different time, and South Park, Eminem, popular culture was like very much interested in saying, "Hey, there's no rules. The only point of life is to pursue your own pleasure. You shouldn't give a shit about anybody else. If anybody tells you to be responsible, tell that person to fuck off because they're just trying to control you." Like it was very this like juvenile teenage mindset that I think is good for the time. Like we had a good time and partied and all that kind of stuff. But at some point you have to grow up. And what I found was that for me specifically, I grew up in a religious household. Then I rebelled against my parents because I think all teenagers do. And then I thought by joining this broader culture of hedonistic pursuit and kind of like narcissistic nihilism, I was being a rebel against my parents, and I was free, psychologically free. But what I think really happened was that I was manipulated, and that's not to like blame anybody. Like I think our society sells every generation a bill of goods.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, so if it's more like social responsibility now these days, or progressive values or something like that, like that's entirely fine. But my generation kind of had everything blown apart and told that the only pursuit is of yourself, and then that hedonism only goes so far, pleasure only goes so far. So when that falls on its ass, you either have like the rigid dogma and religion of your parents, or you have this like nihilist hedonistic culture. And that's where finding Jordan Peterson, where he was kind of able to articulate the parts of religion that I really valued, while not demanding of me that I believe in what I view as kind of a mythology. That was refreshing, because I felt like I got to have my cake and eat it too, where I could derive the deeper meanings and values out of ancient mythological works without necessarily becoming dogmatically religious.
Okay. So then I guess what I would ask then is do you think that there is something inherent to, I guess in this case, just Christianity specifically, that you require or that society requires to function in a desirable way?
Yeah, like well, I think it's Immanuel Kant. I just read this recently, but he was trying to like replace religion because if I remember the YouTube video correctly, he believed that he really valued the religion that he was brought up with, but he also kind of liked the world secularizing, and he believed that it was going to be one of the major crises of the following centuries. So I hadn't heard the term categorical imperative, but basically, kind of like secular morality, I guess, and reciprocity being like the foundation of morality. I think reciprocity specifically is probably a human universal. Like you can't even function in a family unit without some level of reciprocity. But I do think Christianity in particular has an emphasis on humility, turning the other cheek, forgiving people when they are not willing to forgive you. Just kind of this kind of pseudo pacifistic ideology of not being a douche, so maybe other people won't be a douche to you. And I just don't think that's present or as present in other world religions. Maybe Hinduism could correct me, but I know Islam isn't like that, and I
So,
believe
well,
Judaism isn't like that.
I think, and I guess that depends on, because the problem with trying to say that any one religious ideology has that unique to them, because they basically all claim that it's unique to them, is that it depends on one. It depends on what sect of that particular religion you're talking about, because I think it's just with Christianity. There's isn't there like something like 2,000 different like sects of Christianity that can agree or disagree on any number of things. It's ridiculous. So it depends on like what you're talking about. I brought this up in the Discord discussion, but I would argue that depending on which part of Islam you're talking about, there are moderate Muslims who 100% are basically indistinguishable from any other American. So I don't think that it's necessarily. I think that anybody can find that value in their religion. It just depends on how that religion, that belief system is sort of presented to them, and then what they ultimately take away from it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, no, I'm sorry if I interrupted, but all I was going to say was I think that's true, but I think there's also very, very surface level principles and values that are differentiated. So for instance, like if you were talking about liberalism, progressivism, conservatism, communism, all that kind of stuff, you can say that all of these things are political philosophies, and they all have to do with the way power is distributed, the way an economy operates, a way a nation operates. So all of these things are political systems, and you can kind of derive from political systems any interpretation that you want, authoritarian, libertarian, murderous, peaceful, pacifistic, like you can derive any interpretation you want out of any of these political ideologies. I think you're technically correct, but at the same time, I think we'd be fooling ourselves a little bit if we didn't acknowledge that certain ideologies advocate for certain things. And I think we like to jump on this like defensive bandwagon where we're like, we want to respect other people's religion, so we don't want to attack them, we don't want them to feel attacked, we don't want them to feel marginalized, but then we give them a lot of space for them just to say, oh, well, it's my religion and it's what I believe, even if the things that they believe are kind of terrible.
Well,
And I don't see that. I don't see that faith. I know white Christians are the majority in this country, so I'm not trying to upset the progressive hegemony or whatever. But at the same time, you will see basically vicious attacks against people of Christian faith because they're dominant in the culture and all that kind of stuff. But you'll just see people pulling punches when it comes to any other culture, any other faith.
I think that heavily depends on what where you're kind of rooting your view from. So I'm an atheist, and I'm a pretty hardline atheist in that I respect everybody's faith as insofar as that faith doesn't negatively affect others, right? So I'll tell a Muslim person to go fuck themselves for saying that two gay people shouldn't get married just as readily as I'd tell a Christian to do so. I might do it a little bit more eloquently in both situations because I think, there's a rhetorical way to do that. But,
Right.
I think I don't care what your belief system is, as long as that belief system isn't negatively affecting other people. So while I would agree that like right now, Islam has sort of the focus of extremism on it, and rightfully so. There are a lot of radical Muslims in the world, and I think that's worth talking about. I don't think that it's something that ultimately is inherent within the faith. It's just this group of people is using their faith to justify horrible things, much like Christians have done in the past. It's not this again. It's just horrible people doing horrible things, and then kind of building that upon their faith in order to get more support for it. So this is a serious digression from Jordan Peterson.
Oh, we'll get back to him. There's plenty of meat. There's plenty of meat on them bones. Yeah. We'll get back to
that. But so I mean, I think that ultimately where we have to like draw the line in terms of like what like faith is acceptable and what faith is healthy is really only goes as far as how that affects other people. So like right now, I think the reason that Christians are attacked, quotation fingers, attacked in the US is because they're the ones preventing the most social progress. Whereas you don't see that as much from Muslims in the US.
No, that's actually a fair point. Like, and I appreciate your intellectual consistency. I guess I can see that. I guess I can see that, and that's where that's internally consistent. So I'm not going to criticize that too heavily. I have to say, not accusing you of this, but like when I think it's a TV show, Scandal runs Silent Night. The Christmas song during the performance of an abortion, or I think like Samantha Bee has Jesus Christ like ice skating for like Christmas special and like saying some like progressive bullshit. Like I don't know, I'd have to find it, but there's this degree of turning the other cheek that I feel like progressives have this like this like overt hostility towards Christianity that they would not do to any other faith. And I do take your point of, well, if you were looking at who's actually holding culture back from a progressive or liberal perspective the most, it's Christians, it's not Muslims, right? Muslims are probably just trying to make sure that, their mosques aren't going to get shot up or they're not going to get beat up for wearing a turban. So I do, that's a point well taken, but I guess just like that ugliness and that hostility and that openness to kind of like compare, violence or sincerity of belief or anything like that. That's one of the things that's so frustrating for me, because if you pulled a similar stunt anywhere else in the world, basically taking a holy figure and, kind of demeaning them in that way, or if you took a song about a holy figure and then you set it to something that a lot of people would view as antithetical to the religion entirely, you would expect violence. And so for progressives and liberals not to appreciate the kind of like charitability of Christians in that regard, where they can just pull shit like that and not, have violence committed against them. I'm in no way like making a threat. I think this is the way society should be. We should be willing to turn the other cheek. We should be willing to tolerate the extremes of our political opponents. But at the same time, I just think they take it for granted, and it's kind of galling. And no, sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, well, I think that you have a point about it being taken for granted to a point. I think that. I'm an edgy leftist. I think shit like that is just artistically really interesting, like the Silent Night being played during an abortion. I think artistically, whichever side you fall on, that's an incredibly provocative presentation of both of those things.
Heretic, let's nail you to the cross.
But that's the point, is that it's evoking a strong reaction, and
I reacted.
That's the part where
I'm not even Christian, and I was triggered as fuck.
But that's the point, and that's like where that's almost where I'll start to sound like a right winger, where I'm like, why are you throwing such a fit over it? They should be allowed to do that. That's the point. I think that there's more artistic merit to it than I think a lot of people on the right would probably give credence to. But I guess my point is what I was getting at initially is that while it's true to an extent that Christians are incredibly tolerant in the U.S. in terms of, I guess, to generously put it, attacks on their faith. Um, I think that in equal measure, you can find just as many people who are raging out and calling for action against places that do things like that. I'm not familiar with that particular episode of what was it that did
I
this?
thought it was Scandal, but I don't know.
Okay,
It
I'm not
didn't make me
I'm
go
not
and watch the show. I'll tell you that.
I'm not particularly familiar with it, but I almost guarantee there was some sort of backlash or something. I don't follow stuff like that very closely, so I can't really speak to it. But it's one of those situations where it sounds like something that the right would probably do that it accuses the left of doing very often, where they kind of grab their torches and pitchforks and just go mad over it, if that makes sense. And now, to your original point, obviously that's not as bad as violence. We live, despite how politically divided the U.S. in particular is as a country right now, we haven't devolved to violence as much as people, especially the media, likes to portray. We are still pretty grounded in at least the conversation. Whether or not that conversation results in any good faith, arguments is another thing, but at least we're still mostly just grounded in the conversation surrounding those things.
Compared to our rhetoric, you would think people were getting run over and shot in the streets, and of course that's happened, right? Like Charlottesville.
Yeah. But they're the minority. That's the extreme minority of cases.
It's compared to our rhetoric. Our rhetoric, you would think it was happening every other day.
Yeah, but we're not boiling over literally at each other's throats yet. I don't think, and personally, I don't. I say that as a caveat, like you said earlier, for posterity.
No, of course, yeah. Civil War kicks off, you're like, shit.
Oh no, I was wrong. I genuinely, I don't think that it's going to come to that. I'm not particularly pessimistic in that regard. I think that there is still a pretty good chance of salvaging some form of the democracy that we have right now without resorting to an all-out civil war. Mainly because I don't think that the people are their own enemy. I think it's the government versus I shouldn't even say the government, but rather the establishment versus the people that is really the problem. So
yeah.
So well, I think again, I think it's a good point that Christians in the U.S. are much more moderate in their reaction to things compared to other places around the globe. But I don't think, and this is pure speculation on my part, but I don't think that is a result so much of their faith making them like less inclined to radical action, but more that Christianity has undergone such extreme de-radicalization in the West over the past couple centuries that kind of action would be genuinely surprising to me. But it wasn't that long ago that Christianity was used to, used as a vehicle to oppress people still, and it is still to this day to an extent. I mean, gay marriage only became legal not that long ago, and one of the biggest arguments behind it was Christian rhetoric. So I really do think that it's more because of the secular nature of our institutions de-radicalizing Christianity than the other way around, if that makes sense.
Well, you're I could probably use New Testament stuff, but I do want to get back to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And your point is well taken, because the thing about it is that what I'm trying to do in life, what I'm trying to do in this channel, is even if I don't agree with something, I'm trying to understand it. So sure. your point about so let's say that woke progressives wanted to take on the problematic parts of Islam. Well, Islam is not the dominant force in American culture. I think they're around 1% or less than 1% of the population. They have very minimal institutional power, and they're also probably just trying to keep their heads down. That way, they don't get their asses kicked every time a jihadist terrorist attack occurs.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so that point is well taken. So we can get back to Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
If you'd like.
I guess. Oh yeah. No. As much as I'm interested in the religious conversation with you, that we did make a promise to talk about Jordan Peterson, so I think that's
Yeah,
okay.
we'll try.
I know, right? Especially because he touches on so many subsets of society that it can be difficult to stay on topic.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that is as good a jumping point as any to talk about sort of his broader social ascriptions. And so I guess I would ask is, did you discover Jordan Peterson before or after sort of his rise to fame, the Bill C-16 uh, uh, issue?
I would say
guess.
after. I would say when that video went viral of him talking to that crowd or whatever, it was probably
Mhm.
after he had already made his initial YouTube videos, and then that was kind of the blowback on him
Mhm.
from that incident, and then from there he kind of capitalized on the viralness of the situation to kind of
Yeah.
spread his
Yeah.
message.
Yeah. So, but you found him after that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. So and I'm only curious because it's interesting to me because he was not particularly well known before that. I mean, like, that kind of goes without saying, but
Hey,
I
he did
mean,
some cable
really,
access television show. It's
oh,
okay.
cable access. Never mind. How dare I? Uh,
he did.
I've never
He
done
did.
cable access,
He
so
did a
I guess you can.
few local news things, and you know
Um,
what? For Canada, that's a big deal. You got to give him their
that is a big
props,
deal.
man.
He's got to
Like,
reach all
he
10,000 of those people.
he was on the.
So so
Yeah.
so his so anyway, the Bill C-16 thing was sort of his initial claim to fame, right? Like that really, sort of launched his career, I guess, in terms of his social outreach. Obviously, he was a professor before that, but so, and this kind of set the tone for the rest of his career for me, or since then, I should say for me, because when he was addressing the Bill C-16 thing, fuck, I just can't say that. When he was addressing the Bill C-16 thing, he really misrepresented the bill itself and the results that it would have. He went really hard about how it was compelling speech and how they would he said he would go to prison, which to my knowledge he's still not in prison. Um and I guess really because all the bill did ultimately was it added gender identity to the list of protected classes, and that includes cisgender people, not just transgender people who would like their pronouns respected. Um, it literally was just gender identity is not something that you can discriminate against. So it's interesting to me that he got so famous off of, I'm not going to say it was a lie, but it was definitely a really, really brutal mischaracterization of what Bill C-16 was and the effects that it would have. Because to this date, nobody's been thrown in prison or even jail over it. I don't even think anybody's really been fined. It
Well,
only. Oh,
I
go ahead, sorry.
no. It's not. Bear in mind that I've kind of grown on this issue myself, especially
Mm-hmm.
since 2016 or whenever he got
Yeah.
big. But I guess my question for this line of argument would be, would intentionally misgendering somebody be constituted as harassment?
It depends on the context. So if you are just out in public, no. But if you are doing it in sort of a professional capacity, I don't even know if it's even for business. I think it might be for business owners, but I know that within the wording of the legislation, it's specifically targeting government employees.
Mm-hmm.
So government employees would be punishable under this bill.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that but it's not like everyday people. It's not compelling the speech of, and when it says and I'm pretty sure it's only like discriminatory action. So like denying housing for transgender people on the basis of their gender denying a job or denying to employ somebody based on their gender, things like that more than anything.
Yeah, well, so I guess I should just go for what I think he thinks is going on, and also just kind of clarify my position. So my position at this point is kind of like, transgenderism, transgender people are definitely, real, valid, etc. Like, and transitioning can be one of the options available to a trans person who's suffering from gender dysphoria or not. And then I actually have to give credit where credit's due to Luxander, a left-wing non-binary person on YouTube. And God, there's so much ground to cover. It's kind of hard to cover it so quickly.
It's all right. Yeah.
So all right. So let's just do like binary trans real quick. Mm-hmm. I think Dave Chappelle, and sorry for triggering anybody who's trans in the chat, but Dave Chappelle is not the enemy of trans people. If anything, he's the friend, because he made a terrible joke, but admittedly, one that caught a lot of laughs, where he basically said, I believe trans people are real because basically who would want to go through the gender transition process? So, he said it much more vulgar than that. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the kind of statement that can take a normal, blue collar working person and make them think. Because, the transition process is socially grueling. It's physically grueling. I'm sure it's emotionally grueling. So you might see that as this like cruel joke that's making light of the transition. But the larger point is, if you yourself, the only way that a trans person would transition is if they were in a situation in which they felt like they needed to, and that need would be so large because of the grueling physical, mental, and emotional toll. So that's kind of like binary trans people. Do you have anything to add to that before I continue?
I mean, I wasn't super familiar with it. I remember hearing about the outrage. I don't even think I ever actually listened to the bit. I just didn't have enough.
It's a brutal bit.
Yeah, I did. I honestly, I just like comedy for me is one of those things that I listen to very occasionally, and it's usually not because I'm like, oh, how did this? I listen to a lot of offensive comedy, so like. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of leeway for what comedians say and stuff. I realize that people are responsible for what they say and how that might affect other people. But in terms of offensive comedy, I tend to be, I'm pretty all right with just about whatever, depending on, I mean, there is certainly like shit that goes too far, like the guy from Frasier that obviously went too far with his whole shtick way back when. But, mm-hmm. I think for the most part, depending on how it's handled, I think offensive comedy is something that's generally okay. So I at the time, I just was kind of like, whatever. There's other people like Jordan Peterson that I can go after.
Well, fair enough. So so that's kind of like my personal thing on trans people that I think would be a good argument to take with chuds is, what kind of person would be willing to go through that kind of social, emotional, and physical transition unless there was something seriously going on. So that I think that's a good argument for binary trans folk. Not that I'm trying to invalidate them, just that I think it's a good argument for chuds. And then for non-binary, I remember my parents don't believe in homosexuality, right? They're very biblical, they're very literal. They think that it's against the Bible and therefore it's wrong. But my mom, who believes this perspective, mm-hmm. Was watching the TV show Glee before Kurt, the character, came out as gay. And she was like, oh, well, I hate all this progressive stuff, but I love the show, so I'm going to keep watching. And I kind of brought it up to her. I was like, hold on. You're looking at Kurt. Kurt is obviously very soft-spoken. I believe Kurt in real life is a gay man. Can you imagine Kurt being completely heterosexual and having a wife and kids? And that really threw her for a fucking loop. Mm-hmm. Because just through representation of a gay person who's obviously gay and kind of femme, Even asking her that question, it kind of like you could see the, what do you call it, the cognitive dissonance kind of going
Yeah.
on,
Her
where
brain trying to like come to terms with what she thinks versus the new information she's being presented.
right. Well, so
Yeah.
she kind of like finally landed on, you know, the Bible being correct and gay people still being wrong, but you could still see that element of doubt, and I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah.
So Luxander, I think, is a great example of me, because I probably would have been a person who's like, oh, you know, non-binary folk are just trying to be edgy. You know, they just don't want to pick a side, and all that kind of stuff. But then Luxander's story it made a lot of sense, where she's like, listen, I tried to be a woman for a long time, and I just never fit the glove of what a woman is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I tried being a man for a long time, and I just never really fit the glove of what a man is supposed to be. I feel more comfortable this way. I will accept, you know, he, him pronouns, but I'll also go by they if somebody is being courteous enough. And to me, that's such like a small concession to just treat another human being decently, that's not a problem. But you have to bear in mind that at the time that Peterson was coming into being, the whole like 53 pronouns and 200 genders and like all that kind of shit was coming out. So while he's basically saying that you know, Canadian law is going to, you know, throw people in jail for intentionally misgendering somebody, you know, BuzzFeed was, or whoever was, publishing articles with like, you know, 300 different pronouns, you know, like Z, them, zer, and all that kind of crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say crazy to be flippant. I think I think he, she, they is probably the ground that we should be working towards, not
Well,
Z, them, zer.
Well, and all I really have to say on that, because I don't really care what people want to be called. It just doesn't take much from me. It doesn't take anything from me to.
You postmodern neo-Marxist piece of shit.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, oh boy, I just want all white people to be gone, and
you Mayo-siding sack of shit.
I just want a bunch of genderless, weird, fleshy blobs running around that just.
Are we all wearing potato sacks in your future?
We're not wearing anything. There's no clothes. It's a perfect utopia. No, it doesn't take much from me to respect what other people want to be. It doesn't take anything from me to respect what other people want to be called, right? Now, that being said, the whole Z's, A's, or all that, it is an incredible, and I mean, to the point where, as somebody who is almost entirely absorbed within leftist communities, I have never once ran into somebody, and this is all anecdotal, but I don't even know anybody who has ever ran into anybody who wants to be called that. And to me, it's just a non-problem. It's a problem that is being really hyperbolically misinterpreted and over-reported, really, to the point where now everybody's freaking out about something that's just not happening. I mean, you might be like one in a million people who runs into this one person who likes that, and go ahead, respect it. It is weird to me, because the same people who think that rugged individualism is such a foundational concept and construct for society think that they find such a massive problem with just respecting what other people want to be called, which is one of the greatest manifestations of an individual's identity that you can possibly come to terms with. So
but I think they were finding extremists for Jordan Peterson to talk to. So like he was finding professors or people who would come on like the local news Canada show or whatever, who were trying to deny the biological existence of sex, and try to use like, you know, intersex people as examples of how we are not, you know, two separate sexes. You know, intersex people basically invalidate the structure, and you know, transgender people, you know, invalidate the structure. So really, you know, like you said, we need to become amorphous, genderless potato sack wearing blobs, and that's the way of the future. And anybody who doesn't like that is a bigot. So I think they were finding these extreme people for Jordan Peterson to do intellectual battle with because it's it's compelling compelling television. But I think the funny thing though is I heard Jordan Peterson's arguments because obviously I'm a fan, and he's like, pretending that gender and sex are not related is absurd, and gender and sex, gender might be not binary, but it's a bimodal distribution, and then I rooted in sex, and so imagine my fucking shock when I get on Vosh. And obviously, ANCOM, ANCAP, not ANCAP, ANCOM, LibSoc, whatever you want to call them. And then he's like, "Listen, gender and sex are a bimodal distribution." And I'm like, "Son of a bitch! You guys agree, and you're on antithetical political, antithetical parts of the political spectrum." And you allegedly hate each other, but if you just listened for 45 fucking seconds and didn't go against each other's straw man, you'd be like, holy shit, we're both accurately describing reality. Of course, Jordan Peterson has his bad takes, but obviously transgenderism was the rocket fuel that made his career take off. So to hear Jordan Peterson describe the relationship of sex and gender, and then to hear it 3 years later on Vosh after just listening to reactionary right-wing stuff shit their pants over Zems or pronouns, I found that shocking, and that's why I have to pay a little bit of lip service. That's why I'm thankful to people like Contra and Vosh, because by presenting steel man, you can continue to fight the straw man if you want, but if you don't contend with the steel man, then you're kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah. Well, and I actually haven't heard that quote about from Jordan talking about it as a bimodal distribution, which if he understands that, that's cool, and good and awesome. I just wish that he would go the extra step and just say, hey, respecting people's pronouns is a good thing, and it is good for those people. It is, we know that helps them sort of come to terms with who they are. And I'm not saying that as in, do
you have literature on that?
Literature on
the psychological outcomes post transition, because Ben Shapiro likes to do that 40% suicidality post and pre surgery thing.
I had Ben Shapiro. That's another talk. There was a study, and ironically, a lot of people on the right have cited it as proof that transitioning is bad for transgender people. But it was a study, I believe it was done in what was one of the Nordic countries. I'm really having trouble remembering which one. But it was a 20-year study of transgender individuals. And basically the study ultimately concluded that the suicidality rate among transgender individuals was obviously higher than the rest of the population. But the conclusion that they came to was still, hey, we should transitioning is still the best thing for these people, and continued social acceptance and post-transition care is the best thing to deal with the suicidality problem. I will try to find that study.
Can I bring up another point of contention that I think needs to get addressed? Because this was something that was brought up by Jordan Peterson, and I'm literally not trying to concern troll. I'm literally fucking
That's
not.
usually what people say right before they concern troll.
Damn it, you caught me. No, I'm fucking around. So Jordan Peterson said that he worked with a psychologist or a therapist who specialized in gender dysphoria, and that person allegedly submitted literature or just stated out loud that roughly, I believe it was between 40 and 60% of people who suffer from gender dysphoria in adolescence acclimate to a coherent homosexual identity by the time they reach adulthood.
Homosexual, or do you mean cisgender identity, or did you?
No, I mean,
Are you saying they become gay or lesbian?
Yeah, they become gay or lesbian. So,
or I should say that they realize that they're gay or lesbian later.
Yes. So that was kind of like an interesting point that I wasn't able to find any literature on. But then, pardon me, my concern troll. And obviously, this doesn't affect me. If you're trans, you do you. I'm not trying to stop you from doing anything. I'm just trying to find rock bottom here. I'm trying to find foundation.
So
my concern troll would be that if 40 to 60% of people were able to acclimate to a homosexual identity by the time they reach adulthood, then would transition be the best solution for those people? And how do you know the difference?
So sexuality and gender are not they are linked, but it's not a one-to-one distribution. So I think that if you're saying that, I don't know, because it depends on, are they saying, because if they were transgender when they were younger, or if they're transgender, let's say it's a man and they want to transition to a woman and they don't, and then they later come out as gay, if they had transitioned, it would just mean that they were straight, technically, because they are attracted to the opposite gender. Because if you're a transgender woman and you're attracted to men, you're straight. So I don't know. To me, that sounds more like I don't know. That just doesn't sound, I guess, ultimately relevant to whether or not transitioning is the right path for people.
Right.
Because transitioning doesn't really affect sexuality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's still a point of curiosity for me, though, just because I feel like all of this stuff is so new. We're going to be reviewing completely different literature in 20 to 30 years once these issues are more settled.
Yeah. And more well studied. That's the biggest problem, is that up until very recently, like transgenderism just wasn't particularly well studied.
Right.
So I mean, we're lucky to have a 20-year that 20-year study that I said. We're lucky to have that at this point. And
right.
Luckily, like I said, there is more
it's in its cultural infancy.
Sure. Yeah. It's called the acceptance, exactly.
Okay. Well, then, what's your next beef?
Oh boy, let's see. I guess one that, kind of going back to religion, actually, for me is his denial of the existence of true atheists. And because this one personally triggers me, because I'm like,
no, you're a Christian. You're a Christian. No.
I'm pretty sure.
No, you're not. You're Christian. You're lying to yourself.
Last time I checked.
Yeah, this is a dumb idea of his that I do not track on.
Well, hey, look.
Yeah. If you want to articulate it, I'll.
I can't do it better than Matt Dillahunty did in their debate.
That was brutal.
I think, I did think it was funny that he used an example, though, that I could personally attest to, except that it would disprove what he said, which was that I think he said he said something along the lines of, it's impossible to quit smoking without having a spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to smoke, and when I quit smoking, it wasn't the result of a spiritual experience. It was the result of me harshly and very quickly coming to terms with my own mortality. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is all I got. I want to live this to the best I can. And so I just put down cigarettes, and I've never smoked again.
Jordan Peterson would argue that was spiritual.
I mean, I think he'd be wrong, because that I don't know. Like, that's to me,
the existence of an afterlife doesn't have anything to do with spirituality.
No. But it wasn't like a spiritual revelation. It was just like, hey, I'm gonna die if I don't stop doing this. I should stop doing this. Like, it was very practical.
I'm going to take the devil's advocate position on this one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. But the belief that atheists are not really atheists, they're actually Christians because they adopt Christian morals, I think is silly. But I think it's also what he does with this like weird, kind of metaphysics that he's on, where he's like, I act as if God exists because I think that's the way that human beings are supposed to act. Which, like, I think Jordan Peterson himself, on some level, is probably an atheist, or at least agnostic. But sorry, go ahead.
So wait, you think Jordan Peterson is on some level an atheist or agnostic? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he,
Oh, okay.
he's at least an agnostic.
Uh,
No, sorry, go ahead.
I just I'm yeah I to me it just I mean I don't I mean we both agree basically, so I don't know what else to say. That's like it's one of my personal biggest contentions with them, obviously. And if
Well,
you think it's silly,
let me just try to articulate it for people who might be
yeah,
unfamiliar with the argument.
yeah,
He basically says that what you say you believe doesn't matter; it's what you do. So if you have a Christian moral ethic, then you technically believe in Christianity, which I think is a little silly. Because I would actually take an antithetical position, which would be that Christianity and Judaism are basically evolutionary psychology recommendations made by Iron Age mystics for how to live a fulfilled life and a better life. And then they get kind of wrapped up in mysticism and spirituality in order to have authority over people's lives. But I think the codification of morals is an attempt by flawed human beings to try to live longer, better, happier, healthier lives, and then they just kind of wrap it into the orders of God, so they have cultural authority.
yeah. I would agree with that. I tend to think that sort of my personal view is that religion is just a early attempt to explain the world because we didn't know how else to do it, and that's fine. I just don't think it necessarily has much relevancy in a modern society. But that's just more my extreme flavor of atheism, and not so much extreme in that I think it should be forcibly stamped out, but I don't think that neither should it be like this as culturally prevalent as it is.
Well, you need to replace it with something.
Uh,
That would be my argument. So Kant tried with the categorical imperative, but I'm telling you the reason. This is my personal opinion, but I believe in it strongly. The reason why you're seeing people adapt these extreme political ideologies is not just because of income disparity and desperation. It's also because a spiritual or religious need. So when you see people, woke skulls in particular, and fascists, because fascism is actually a spiritual ideology, when you see them grab onto it with religious fervor and fight other people in a religious way, they're fulfilling that spiritual part of themselves. So if you just say we don't need religion and and spirituality is just bullshit, just figure it out for yourself and try to live a good life. That's not enough for most people.
okay, so I want to clarify that later part, but I wouldn't necessarily say spirituality doesn't exist insofar as spirituality is the relationship you have with sort of your subconscious self. I think that there is value to that.
You
But
disagreed
I
with
don't
Jordan
think
Peterson, bro.
I well, I'm not like I said, his self help stuff I don't necessarily have an inherent problem with, but there's some other stuff that so yes, so spirituality isn't necessarily the problem. I just don't think that needs to be expressed through religion. What your take on religion is interesting though about because I would actually replace religion with a social need, not a religious or spiritual need. Because I think what religion did for a really long time was it satisfied the religious requirements of individuals, or sorry, not the religious requirements, the social requirements of individuals, because we are a social species. And what happens when many people share something like a religion is they tend to congregate and they share that religion with each other. What's important there isn't the religion, it's the congregation and the coming together that it encourages. And I think that that is valuable. But again, I don't think that that is significantly intrinsic to religion as it is just people and people needing a way to express it. Vosh has talked about this actually a couple times, about how we're a social species, and before we lived these large metropolitan lives, people lived in small communities, and even before that, they lived in small tribes, and those tribes were incredibly close knit. So you you had to interact with everybody because it was necessary to your survival. That's very important for social species. Is the socialization is necessary to the survival of the group and the individual. So I would actually argue that it's not the religious and spiritual need that people are seeking to fulfill. It's the social need that they're trying to fill, which used to be filled by religion.
Well, I'll concede that basically I wouldn't mind starting like a secular church of Central Florida, where you play like a few good songs that you like at the beginning and the end, and then you just talk about like some cool philosophy or astrology shit in the middle, and then have a coffee break afterwards. I'll agree to that part, but I think this is kind of something that not you, but I'm thinking of something somebody very specific from my high school. He was like, I'm not scared to die. I'm not scared of dying. I'm not scared of death. I'm not scared of any of it. And for me, just being honest with myself, I am. I am scared of mortality. I am scared of the end. I am scared of spending, eternity in oblivion. I don't think dying feels good. That's mostly because I've seen other people die. So it probably doesn't feel good on your way out. So I do have that fear, and I acknowledge that fear. And I think it's very easy for us as younger, healthier, stronger people to kind of, push that off to our future selves and not think about life and its purpose and mortality and all of that jazz, and not experience mortal dread or fear. And I'm just not one of those people. I think I'm honest enough to admit to myself that, I am afraid of those things, and I think with good reason. I think that's one of the driving forces of this world is, sex and death, life and death. It's the two things that we're most obsessed about. If you look at all of our media, it's one of two things. It's either people fucking or killing each other.
Yeah, well, it's our evolutionary imperative is to spread our genes and then eventually die. I mean, that's just life.
Yeah,
So,
but
yeah,
you need to reckon with that.
oh no, I totally I agree, and I think that it does. I think you're right in that it does get sidelined a lot, especially for younger people, in favor of just living, which for me, I would ultimately argue that you can sort of you can intertwine life and death, where it's sort of like living like while you can because you will die someday. But I also recognize that that can be a slippery slope for people, where it's like, well, if I'm going to die anyway. But I think that more often than not, that's sort of a minority of people. I do agree that I think that.
Are you calling me an asshole?
I'm calling you an asshole. No,
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 because I think you just hit a really important point, which is I think I was one of those people.
Yeah.
Who basically said, this is all going to be over one day. I don't know what's on the other side. I'm just going to do whatever I want right now. And that led me to be a very selfish, self-centered, pleasure-seeking asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jordan Peterson's argument, and maybe my argument, is that that's a shitty way to live, and you need something deeper in order to live a better life. And if you're looking, you can take it back to Evo Psych and go back to reciprocity and just say the reason why you shouldn't be an asshole is because you don't want people to be an asshole to you. But that's not necessarily true. People can be assholes for their entire lives, and avoid a lot of the consequences that they've imposed on other people. But those chickens all do come home to roost eventually, and that's kind of what I would say is Jordan Peterson and my perception of morality is that there, or God ordained law, is that there are these natural consequences that are imposed on you through the natural world, and the natural world is trying to communicate with you. Matt Dillahunty almost got Jordan Peterson to say it, but Jordan Peterson backed off at the tail end of it. where I almost think that Jordan Peterson was like 10 seconds away from saying like the way you communicate with God is through hallucinogens. like
Yeah.
I think he was like 2 seconds away from
It was
saying
pretty
that.
close. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I agree with that as somebody who's done hallucinogens. You wanna hook into the bottom of reality and try to understand your own mind and how it hooks into your larger world.
Mhm.
Do shrooms or acid, and you'll see the world in a completely different light.
See, that's interesting because this is one of the areas where so I've never actually done any the closest I mean I've smoked weed. That's as far as I've ever gone basically in terms of drug use and hallucinogens. To me, I think that's always an interesting conversation because to me it is interesting that people really hinge the idea that you're really getting to know something intrinsic about yourself and the universe on something that inherently alters your brain chemistry.
Hmm.
Like it's a function of that. And to me, it just seems like an odd method of self-discovery when you're using something that the way it makes you feel like that is by changing the like every almost everything about how you think. So I think there's value in hallucinogens. I'm actually really interested in like the study of. There's been a lot of studies recently about how microdosing because I suffer from like PTSD and depression and anxiety and a pretty gnarly panic disorder. And so a lot of the studies that have come out recently about microdosing and how that can help people with most of those disorders really interests me just on a personal level. Um, but yet I don't know. I don't know how much credibility I'm able to give to the idea that hallucinating is a good way of discovering more about yourself because I kind of maybe I put too much emphasis on the lucidity of thought, but I kind of I inherently distrust anything that alters the way I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, in the thing that I would say that Jordan Peterson said that was quite powerful for me was accepting the irrationality of existence. And
Hmm.
if I had to give you some advice from somebody who's probably suffered similar things, I was always trying to control and outthink my way out of my own feelings. And I was
Hmm.
trying to outthink my way out of my problems. And I thought that if I was just smart enough or fast enough, or if I read the right book, or if I talked to the right person, then just everything would snap into place and I would be at peace.
Hmm.
And what I kind of realized is that religious people have that peace, but they believe in an irrational thing, right? It's not something
Yeah.
that's backed up by logic. So what I kind of realized is the secret is realizing that you're a fucking monkey spinning on a dirt ball in the
Yeah.
void of space, doing 10,000 miles an hour around a giant ball of superheated gas, and just realizing how fucking absurd that is.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're mortal and one day that it's going to end, that makes it even more absurd and kind of, cherry on the cake.
Hmm.
And, you trying to think your way out of that, not only is it a massive use of energy, it's just not going to work. And at some point, you don't have to like your mortality. You don't have to like your history. You don't have to like yourself.
Hmm.
But you can accept it. And liking something and accepting something are two different things. And that took me a really long time to learn because all of the movie heroes, right? They run into a crowd of zombies with a grenade belt strapped to themselves and they blow themselves up happily in order to save their friends, right? The hero willingly jumps into the sea monster's mouth, like all that kind of shit.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that's how you were supposed to be when you were confronting death. But what I kind of realized is that you don't have to be like that, and you don't have to be happy about it. You just need to accept it. And that was
Hmm.
kind of something that actually did bring me a small level of peace of mind.
Yeah. Well, and I guess where this kind of brings me back to one of my initial points was that if that is, Jordan Peterson's personal thought on that, then again, it's not particularly revolutionary
Mm.
or groundbreaking. Again, I think it's fine that he's, I think it's good actually that he's bringing that to an audience of people who maybe haven't been exposed to that kind of thought. But it to me, it's just it is odd that he is heralded um, from a lot of people as this just absolutely revolutionary thinker, and I just don't see that, because a lot of his more original ideas are where people start to go, I don't think that's how that works, like,
Yeah.
so I mean, and
Well,
that's where a lot of
listen,
my personal yeah, go ahead.
listen. It's an intentional conspiracy by globalist elites to manipulate us out of our Western heritage and to forget all of the great thought leaders of our time.
The
And
postmodern neo-Marxist is
it's a communist cabal, not Jewish, but communist, and they're trying to make
exactly.
you
It's
forget
not
the
Jewish.
greatness of your ancestors, and you need to remember that. You need to remember the
Yeah,
greatness
yeah.
of your ancestors, and you need to not listen to these globalist snakes. Definitely not Jews, but definitely globalist snakes.
Okay,
And
so you understand that there's some weird like dog whistly language that he kind of uses that
I
he
don't,
uses
I
a
don't
lot.
think, I don't think he is. I don't think he believes in the JQ.
No, and that's not what
Um,
I mean though. Is that but he uses
he has
language
a very
that
Red Scare boomer take on communism
yeah,
and leftism. And
and
I'm
and
not, I'm not trying to defend communism or leftism. I'm just saying he has a very
oh, I
Red
know you're not.
Scare.
I've had conversations with you about both. I know you would never do that. Uh, but that's kind of my point, is that when the and I made this point in one of the Discord chats, was that it's not so much that I think that he is intentionally directing people towards alt-right lines of thought. It's that the language that he uses and the implications he makes within a lot of his speeches and lectures and stuff can really easily kind of like funnel people down that rabbit hole, because it's not a huge like like hop, skip, and a jump from there's a certain value in the traditional family of Western society to the Jewish question. Like, those things tend to be really closely related, and so just because he's not, at least the proponents of both of those things, the fact that he's not necessarily espousing the Jewish question, or like saying that exists, it's the fact that he's espousing the former, the traditional family values and stuff like that can lead people towards more extreme lines of thought, like the Jewish question. So,
Yeah,
and,
we'd
and
probably
so
have to
what?
have a longer question about traditional family values, because I think that goes back to religion with kind of like evo psych advantages,
Mm-hmm.
which I know evo psych or evolutionary psychology is kind of controversial amongst progressives because they just see it as like post hoc justification for things they don't like.
Just a
Um,
little bit.
yeah, but my point would be that I would see religion as an attempt to make prescriptive choices that give people evolutionary advantages.
Mm-hmm.
I think the proof is kind of in the pudding and in the simplicity and stability of it. But I'm also sympathetic to the fact that heterosexual monogamous relationship for life, specifically for rearing children, is not going to work out every single time.
Mm-hmm.
But just because you have an ideal and it doesn't work out doesn't mean that there's not advantages to those ideals. And that's where I would push back a little bit on anybody who is trying to say that a heterosexual monogamous relationship doesn't have advantages like reducing jealousy, making sure partners know where each other are at, stability for the kids, like all that kind of stuff. Anybody who's like, well, that's possible within a polyamorous, bisexual relationship. Yeah, possible.
Well, but
But
I would I
what's
would say
the
similarly, it's possible in a monogamous relationship, but as as a kid whose parents got divorced, to me, I hear monogamous heterosexual relationship. I'm like, well, most of my personal experiences with that they've been more or less failures in terms of like the longevity and the happiness that was provided while they lasted. And not just for like my parents, but a lot of my friends, my cousins, it, to me, I see that as also incredibly fragile.
Listen,
So
Osiris, a
mm.
conspiracy of globalist elites sold your sold your parents a bill of goods
Bill of
about
goods, yeah.
happiness being the priority in life, and
Well,
definitely not Jews, but globalist elites told them that their happiness was the paramount value in their lives, and they destroyed the family. And definitely not Jews, but just globalist elites.
Just globalist elites, right?
In order to break apart the family, so the wife would have to work, so the GDP could go up, and you could be raised in subpar public education systems, so you could become a slave at Walmart. We're laughing,
no,
but
I think there, as much as we're joking, there is value to the idea that like it would have been like your parents' generation as well, but my parents' generation, your parents' generation, and many of the generations before them, the social pressure was on to settle down as quickly as possible, pump out some babies, and own a home. And the reality set in pretty quickly, I think, that isn't a very efficient or effective social model for producing happy adults. Because what ends up happening is you get people rushing. I mean, even my generation, I have tons of friends who rushed into marriage, and they got divorced maybe a year later in some cases.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, and a lot of it is due to the social pressure, because there's value, and they heard there's the value in having a partner and being stable and settling down. But while I think that's true for some people and in some cases, I just don't think it's how we as a society are wired, especially in a culture where we're starting to respect the individual more. Because the reason that was really successful, in like the industrial age, and the especially the 1900, the early and mid 1900s, was because women didn't have a lot of power in the household. I mean, and in some places they still don't. And so they couldn't, they didn't have any recourse when they settled down to somebody, and then they realized, oh no, I hate this person. And so they were stuck there. And now we're seeing a world, and it's good. It's very good, because, and this disproportionately affects women, because before women didn't have the power, but now people in general can say, I don't like this. I need to get out of this. This isn't good for me at all. And so that's why you have such a high divorce rate. And I think that at this point, it's just kind of figuring out where, like, what is best for us now, because I don't think we can go back to that everybody has this perfect happy little family that they go home to, and there's no problems with it, and everybody has a white picket fence.
But I think that was an ideal that never existed. And
no, it didn't. But it's romanticized like it did. That's the problem.
Here's where I need to defend it a little bit. Here's where I need to defend it a little bit, though. I think people have this very naive and childish mentality that, and it was a quote. It was like a Rolling Stone article, and it was some like country rock star, and they were like, "You've been married to your wife for 65 years. How did you guys make it last?" And he said, "We grew up in a time where if something was broken, you didn't throw it away, you fixed it." And I feel like I'm not trying to, tradcon, virtue signal over here. But I think there's something very true about our media where we just have these like whirlwind romances that lead into perfect relationships.
Hmm.
And that's what we think our lives are supposed to be like. So when we have a flawed person in front of us who is our partner, who makes us mad sometimes, who doesn't pick up after themselves, who doesn't do this right and doesn't do that right, we come up with a laundry list of reasons to press the ejector button and jump out of the
Hmm.
relationship. But when it comes to kids, and it comes to kids in particular, I think a lot of people are still pressing the ejector button while not thinking about, can I repair my relationship? Can I make this
Hmm.
somebody that I want to be with? Can I build a life with this person that I want? And can I build a life that's good for my kids?
Yeah.
And I think this emphasis on the individual, while important, and exploring as a young person and living an interesting life as a young person is important. I think that part of having kids, which, like you said, prime directive of a living creature is to have, propagate.
Hmm.
Um, when you have a kid, here's another thing: is you are no longer the center of attention. You are no longer the focus. Your entire day, your entire week, and the day and the week of your partner is revolved around raising healthy, happy kids. And some people are not ready for that responsibility. And a lot of people resent the sacrifice. And even people such as myself, who genuinely enjoy parenthood, we do find it challenging. So to erode this institution and to say it no longer serves a purpose and we can just have, polyamorous, bisexual people raising kids in a tribal setting and that's just the way that we're going to get by. I think that opens you up to a lot of the problems of the old world. You say that the old world used to do it that way. Well, what was the rate of abandoned children in the old world? What was the rate of abused children in the old world? What was we don't know, but we're going to find out. And so that's where I think the balance is. You can have the individualism of youth where, let's say, from 15 to 25, you just figure out who you are and what you want to do. But from pretty much the time you get married and decide to have kids, it's no longer about you. And that's a lack of maturity in our culture that I actually find kind of upsetting.
So that's I mean, I actually I agree with the last part of that. The people are, and this is because I'm a filthy communist. This might go to my just like my personal problems with like the way our education system is structured, and the I think we should be funneling more money into our education system than we do for sure. I think people come out of school without a solid handle on who they are. And a big part of that is because you're not even a fucking person until you're like 26. I just became a person this year. Oh my God. Um,
It goes by
but
fast.
yeah, it's crazy. But you don't even like that. But I mean, I'm serious that you don't really know anything about yourself until you're like mid 20s. You're not really comfortable as an individual until then. And I can only imagine it keeps going after that, just maybe not as bad. Because God, I remember I went through maybe 7 different personalities between 18 and 24. You know, and I think that a big part reason big I mean the biggest contributor to that obviously is that we're just not fully mentally developed yet. That's obviously like one of the biggest things. But I think the other biggest thing is that we're just not encouraged or really taught how to be ourselves. And that's really depressing to me that like kids are sort of molded instead of encouraged. You know, kids come out of school with like, you know, you need to go to college, then you need to get a job, and then you need to find somebody and you need to marry them, and then you need to have kids, and you need to do it in that order.
Do you
Instead of
do you
being
think
like,
that pressure is still the predominant pressure in our society?
I don't know as much right now for kids and schools. I know that when I was in school, it was still very much like, hey, you need to go to college. At the very least, it was, hey, you need to go to college and you need to get a job. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the two biggest things. And there wasn't really a lot of option for alternative beyond that. Certainly there was a lot of social, especially familial pressure for me to, not necessarily from my parents, but like, extended family. There's a lot of familial pressure to, get married. And even now I still, like, I go to family function. It's like, hey, Connor, when are you gonna have a kid? Or when are you gonna find somebody to settle down with?
Mm-hmm.
And I fantasize about the next family funeral I'll be going to. But the
Damn. High school.
but so I don't know how prevalent that is now, but I haven't even been out of high school for 10 years, so I can't
Mm.
imagine that it's lessened to a degree where it's non-existent. It might not be as bad, but it's still there, and I can't imagine that it's better in terms of producing individuals instead of producing members of society, if that
Well,
makes sense.
yeah, I'm gonna hit you with one more Jordan Peterson thing, and then
Hit me.
I'm gonna let you have the last word.
All
Maybe
right.
maybe we can have a little discussion, but the wife is in the other
All
room,
right.
and part
Okay.
of my obligations are to make
Ah.
sure my wife's happy.
Okay.
So one of the other things that I really liked from Jordan Peterson was he said that we always tell kids to be yourself when we
Mhm.
really should be telling them to become yourself. And I found that pretty profound because the truth is, when I was 16 or 17, I had all these dreams. Like I wanted to skydive, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to join the military, and I wanted to do hardcore stuff, and like all that kind of jazz. So all of these attributes of my personality about how big and bad and tough I was, you're not able to express that when you're a 17-year-old kid going to high school and you have like extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
So I always felt lacking and kind of not able to relax within my own skin because I hadn't accomplished anything yet. And when people told me be yourself, I was like, I don't even have a fucking personality. Like I don't even have experiences yet or
Yeah.
perspectives. So that's where, out of the, out every 20 minutes or 30 minutes of a Jordan Peterson lecture, there's at least one sentence where I go, oh, fuck me. That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And become yourself was one of them that I think would be excellent advice for any person who's under the age of 25. It's like, if you're trying to figure it out, don't think that you need to have everything accomplished immediately. You don't need to be yourself. You need to set a goal about who you want to be, and then you need to become that person.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is a lot of that's the thing is you won't get a lot of pushback from me on a lot of his self-help stuff, at least in regards to the stuff that isn't necessarily like intrinsically grounded in religion and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that sounds like something I could have just as easily heard from like my therapist or something. So if it helps people, that's
But
good.
some
And
people some people can't afford a therapist, and all they have is YouTube. You know.
I'm sorry, you broke up. What was that?
Oh, I was saying some people can't afford a therapist, and some people only have YouTube.
Yeah. I and I mean, like, that's what I'm saying is, like, if that helps people, that's good, but I don't think it makes Peterson particularly profound or revolutionary. It just means that he's this generation's sort of motivational speaker, and which is fine. Again, if it helps people, that's cool, and I don't have a problem with it.
No,
My
it's a
problems,
it's a globalist conspiracy to destroy you.
it's the global it's the globalist, they're not Jewish, but no, again, it is, it's where I feel his rhetoric can potentially not be directly harmful, but lead people towards harmful thought processes.
Hmm.
That's where I start to, so you kind of have to parse through what he says, and like, okay, this is sort of the harmless self-help stuff. This is the kind of borderline dog whistly stuff, and this is the genuinely problematic stuff, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I don't have a problem if that helped. And hey, man, if that helped you, I'm glad that it did. I think that's super cool. I mean, I know that it helps like I said, my brother's a big fan of him. He doesn't give a shit about Jordan Peterson's politics. He just
Hmm.
likes his self-help stuff. And I tell him, I'm like, well, that's cool. That's fine.
Right.
I don't really care about that stuff. It's his other, political ascriptions that I tend to get a little shitty about.
Nope. Eat beef only. Everybody
Eat
on
beef
the all
only.
beef diet right now.
Just you can't drink apple cider. And my Jordan Peterson impression was terrible. But yeah, apple cider, it just destroyed me for a whole month, man. I was just done.
Yeah.
So never again. I
But
didn't sleep all month.
in one more thing in his defense, and then I gotta get going. But I always trust that like the mystics and shamans of our ancient societies were crazy lunatics who like they said some deep shit, but then they said some off the wall shit too. So that's kind of where like if Jordan Peterson is a flawed person who does fucked up shit on occasion and has some bad takes every now and then, and sometimes looks like he's bordering on the verge of insanity itself. I just view that as him fulfilling his cultural role as our new age YouTube shaman, to give us good life advice, but then also tell us to stop drinking apple cider and to eat steak. So
maybe maybe I think that there's helpful people that you can find online that are probably just as revolutionary or more revolutionary than he is, but don't have like the problematic stuff attached, and that to me and the big and the self and his since his rise to fame was the problematic stuff. It's really hard to divorce him from that. It's really hard to take that out of him unless he just comes out and renounces it and says like, yeah, I said that, but that was stupid and wrong, and now I'm going to focus on my self-help stuff, which would be awesome, and I'd be super down with that, but he hasn't yet. So I mean,
well, fair enough, man. Well, Connor, thank you for coming on. I
Connor,
really do appreciate
good talking to you. Great name, man. Hey, the name is like seriously my favorite thing. No bias or anything. Just a good, rock solid name.
Strong Irish name.
I'm Scottish, so I'd probably resent that a little bit. Good Celtic name. All right.
Yeah. Celtic. All right. Good enough. Fair enough. All right, bud. You have a great night.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. It was a good chat.
All right. Catch you, bud.